Well, we are so excited to be here today. We have got another 50 minutes or so to share so much information with you. I know there's no way that we're going to get through it, and I hope that you take the next couple days to get to know each of the panelists here. Don't be nervous. Go up to them afterwards, ask them questions. They are definitely thought leaders in the industry. So let's go ahead and start. Early case assessment, isn't it working? It's always fun with these new technologies to kind of bounce them around a little bit in the beginning and see where they actually go over a couple of years. So I think we've got some great insights happening today. I'm going to start with routing. So what is the single biggest change you've seen since you started becoming involved with eDiscovery?
Well, I would say that it is what we talked about it really in one of the first sessions. It's preservation and litigation hold. I started practicing law 42 years ago, and there is no greater change that's taken place than electronic discovery in those 42 years. And really it's in the last 10 since really the Zubilake opinions came down in the early 2000s. I was talking to somebody earlier, I don't recall writing a litigation hold letter until about the time that the Zubilake cases came down in the 2003 time frame. And now I write 10-page capital letters giveth, fine print taketh away type litigation hold letters to my clients. And the whole issue of trigger and the scope are the big challenges, as I think that last panel demonstrated.
Great, great. How about you, Michelle?
Well, and I also think adding on top of that is we're generating so much more data. It's cheap to store it. Sorry, it's cheap to store it. So everybody's saying, well, why delete anything? We'll just store it and keep it forever. And we also have a bunch of different technologies now. I mean, who would have thought 5 years ago? The iPad. Laptop computers. I mean, I remember my first laptop computer, which was just a big hunk of steel that you're carrying around. And now that you can hook up to any Wi-Fi hotspot, IMing, text messaging, I mean, the volume of data and social media is just growing, and trying to keep a handle on everything and how we're going to use that in discovery and litigations.
Yeah, so all we're waiting for is what you guys watched Dr. Who this weekend, the eye patch, which is the little iPad. Have you watched that? I'm the geekiest person in the room, really. All right. Come on, Chris, fess up.
I see the involvement of judges, I see as the biggest single development, both in my jurisdiction and in this one. Not enough of them, and too many who have not got there yet. But in my jurisdiction in England, where active management by judges is required, it's actually written in the rules, judges will manage cases actively. We are slowly beginning to see judges actually influencing how things happen. There are a handful here, pro rata probably to the total number of judges, probably about the same.
Thank you.
The surprising thing is along the lines of what Chris and Michelle were saying, the enormous scale of the problem in eDiscovery is kind of staggering, and the encouraging thing is it's an informed populace. Like you mentioned, Chris. The judges are very aware of technology and what it can do. They ask very
some are.
We'll get into that. But the number of lawyers who are much more technology savvy is really encouraging. And then, as Michelle says, with the amount of information in different formats and floating around in different places, kind of this collective consciousness of how we're going to deal with social media and things like that coming to the fore. We haven't figured it out yet, but people are aware of the issues and they're working on it.
Yeah, picking up on where Browning's point, there's an acceptance of eDiscovery now. People, I think when we first started working in this area, there was a sense that it was a problem that was just going to go away. We have all the rules we need, everything's in place that needs to happen. You can't show me a box, you can't show me a computer or a server that I can't compare to a warehouse or a garage full of documents. That sort of thinking I think, is out the window. I think we've gotten good at building metaphors that are very helpful, but I think eDiscovery and discovery of information that's technology-based is here to stay. So with that, we're seeing a growth in the specialization and an expertise among lawyers, among in-house counsel, among judges that is just it's just getting started. I think that's the biggest change.
Well, Steve, I'm actually going to ask you a question. Is eDiscovery today where you thought it would be 5 years ago?
5 years ago, when I would get a call about eDiscovery, it was usually from someone, like I'm a technologist, so people were calling me and they say, look, you've solved a lot of these big scalable problems before. I archive data for someone and I just can't get through it with the existing products. I'm seeing terabytes of data stored for my hedge fund clients and I can't get through it. What am I going to do about this? People were also very, very concerned about the emerging rules and what am I going to do about it. So they were buying storage left and right. I mean, EMC was backing trucks up to loading docks and just putting storage into place. People were just archiving everything. It seems like the first wave was, well, let's hang on to everything. Let's buy a really good archiving system. Then the next issue was, well, how are we going to look through all this stuff? And now, as we look ahead, the thing that surprises me is people haven't done more to classify and understand the data they have. They seem to still be kind of hanging on to, well, let's save everything. I thought that would be a little farther along than it is. I think as we get farther along in the program, we talk about future technologies. I think we're going to have a huge impact as more and more stuff will have to get stored in the cloud out of necessity. And that'll drive into the infrastructure policy management and metadata storage that we have to be able to retrieve things that we know are out there. But the scale is going to be massive. I mean, everyone in this room has a device with 500 gigabytes of storage on it. They have multiple devices like that. That's going to generate business records that have to be stored somewhere. So that's all going to probably be the next knee up in the curve. I did think that we'd be a little farther along than we are behind the corporate firewall in terms of managing unstructured data.
Absolutely. That's very good points. How about you, Bill?
Well, I would kind of ask Steve, is one of the technologies that what I would like to have seen, I thought it was doable, was technology that classifies the information. I mean, isn't that kind of the what's missing in the picture in terms of storage? And are we getting there? Are we close to being able to classify information?
That is missing. And the thing that seems to hold it back is that there isn't kind of one fundamental idea that everyone has about this is what we ought to classify on. Like everyone we run into says, wow, I know I have a lot of data for employees who don't work here anymore. I know I have data for dead people. I know, I know I have all their Home Depot and Best Buy mail. What we haven't done is bothered to go in and say, here, take the software, and if it's from Best Buy and it's about hardware, nuts and bolts, it's not a business record. It's possible. It's just I don't think people have the corporate will to do it.
Yeah, I think that's what surprises me the most, or where I think we've gotten it out. When I first got into eDiscovery, I was trying to get email into the courtroom, and I was in Outlook, and it wasn't working. So I found the tools to do it, but it just seems like it should be so simple, and it is excruciatingly painful to take something that just feels like it should be easy, and it's just not. Of course, that's one of the reasons why we're all here, but I would have thought that we would be closer to the point where we can say eDiscovery is a solution and the technology is a solution, whereas I think right now most of us are in a world where eDiscovery, eDisclosure is more of a problem to be solved and can be solved. But that's where I would see things.
Yeah. It's still reactive and not as proactive as you'd like it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that it does stem back to your information management and can you get your house in order. But then I think it goes even further that we have to keep ahead of everything and be fresh and be educators and educate people sitting on the other side of the table from you because they may not be thinking about these things. I mean, we have an obligation to negotiate for our clients. I mean, we do it when we're on the other side of a subpoena from the government. You negotiate, you figure out who your key custodians are, what types of documents you're looking for. I mean, the document requests are now any and all. And they're very broad, and I think they're causing the knee-jerk reaction for everybody to over-preserve, over-collect, over-review. as much as they can filter with search terms or any of these other early case assessment tools. I think the human component is just education and what are we really looking to get at here. It could be a tremendous amount of savings, but I think because of the adversarial nature of litigation, I don't know how many are willing to come to the table and talk about things and show you products.
That's a very good point.
I gave up making predictions in 1993 when I realised that wasn't, after all, going to be the year of the big push. One prediction easily made 5 years ago and remakeable every year is that technology gets better and better and beyond our dreams every 12 or 24 months, and that there will be things that we can do in a year's time, 2 years' time anyway, that we simply can't conceive of now, and that one ought to build that into one strategy to some extent.
Well, the differences between the UK and here, the 5-year difference.
There is no 5-year difference.
No. Okay.
We close it all the time. I don't particularly take to that as a picture, not least because we follow in your footsteps to some extent. Certainly on the technology side, we benefit very much. We're able to say if it's good enough for the strains that FRCP places more or less deliberately on those who litigate, then it's good enough for us.
Yeah, Browning.
Well, I sort of like the Larry Lessig email bankruptcy solution, where on a periodic basis he declares he's got too much email, he can't deal with it anymore, and so he declares bankruptcy, erases everything that he's got, because clearly he's not subject to a hold, and says, if it was really important, send me another email. Kidding aside, I think the biggest problem is that we're all records managers now. But most of us really don't know that. Point number one. Point number two is I'm acidly certain that nature abhors records management for the simple reason that whatever classified, you could have 2 buckets to put things in, and people wouldn't do it for whatever reason. So I despair of records management solutions.
So what do we do? No, I'm not going to ask that question yet. And actually, this next one is for Michelle. What is your past experience with early case assessment?
I was trying to think back. We were, I think all of these panels are looking back to where we were and remembering where we came from and how things are now. And I think, like I spoke about before, it's, over-preserving, over-collection, over-processing. You would start with just running your key search terms, a date filter. Then people got smart and decided that they can get rid of certain system files or file type extensions that may be extraneous. And then I remember this one tool came along that...
You don't name the tool.
I will not name the tool, but remember the little Petri dish thing so you can kind of tell who was where? And that's I think that's what I think of the first early case assessment, except for it was extremely flawed because if I recall, it only worked on the data set. At that time, at least, it only worked on the data set that you brought in. So subsequent data sets wouldn't all link up, and you couldn't figure out, am I missing a relevant custodian? Do I have too many custodians? Is there anybody that I can get rid of? So I think now we should focus on coming to the meet and confer with something real on the table, figuring out through talking to the client and their IT management to figure out who the most relevant custodians are and where the data would be. And like we were talking about earlier this morning in the rules panel was, when do we stop taking custodians at their words that this is where the data lives? Take that, sample it, and figure out your search terms. And you're able to do a lot of iterations so you can come up with a defendable process and really come up with a solid set of terms that's going to get you the data that you need and not all of the junk that you don't. I also think that there's a big disconnect, especially before when you went through this whole process and then you handed everything off to a document review team, which was not very well managed by the case team. So by the time the case team got the most relevant documents, they're going down a whole different path of what their strategy of this litigation is when the documents show something else. So I think early case assessment is great and looking at getting to what the relevant data really is and building a timeline and showing where this case should go.